Hey, what's up, everybody? So I'm coming to you this morning with the Canelo versus Avni Yildrim breakdown video. In this video, I'm going to go over in depth this fight. Canelo's one of my top 12 boxers, most must-see boxers in the sport right now. And that's not a pound-for-pound thing. That's just the guys that we want to see the most. So anytime they fight anybody, I'm going to do a is on video where I let you know that the fight is on whenever it gets announced or shortly thereafter. And then I will do a breakdown video about 3 or 4 weeks before the fight. And then after the fight, about a week after the fight, I do the aftermath video. So, because whenever these guys fight, it's a big deal. Whenever these top guys in the sport fight, it's a big deal no matter who they're fighting. Because we're going to tune in and pay attention no matter who they're fighting. So I like doing these videos, kind of give you in-depth what I think about the fight. If the guy that he's fighting has any kind of chance. And, I ask some pretty big questions. Like, I'll start it off with the guys and what they're doing, where they're coming into this fight, why this fight got announced kind of deal. And then I'll break it down individually between the two fighters saying, I'll ask a bunch of questions like, what does each guy need to do to win the fight? Then the second question would be, if can they win by decision? Can they win by knockout? What does it mean for them and for boxing if they win? What does it mean for them and for boxing if they lose? All that kind of stuff. And then finally, I'll give my prediction at the end. So, again, guys, if you like my videos, please hit the thumbs up. If you don't like it, hit the thumbs down. It's fine. I wish you did like it, but if you don't, you can not like it also. And definitely give me your feedback. I will take criticism. But if you do and you really like it, then subscribe to the channel because I'm trying to get more people the information is what it is. So anyway, so let's jump in. First off, I want to answer the question why this fight is happening. Because I think a lot of people, I know there's some people that are not happy with Canelo. They're thinking Canelo chose this guy. And that's not true. Canelo chose his path at 168, that he wants to become the undisputed world champion at 168 pounds, super middleweight. He's made that clear. And in order to do that, heading into his last fight against Callum Smith, now the WBC, which is the green belt, they allowed Canelo to fight for their vacant world title. That title was vacant, and they allowed Canelo to fight for that belt. Now, Avni Yildrim was the mandatory challenger originally, and he was being talked about for December for Canelo, but Canelo wanted to fight Callum Smith. Now, Callum Smith also, when he won the World Boxing Super Series, was highly touted and was given a belt and high in the rankings of the WBC. So they approved the fight, but they had to make a deal with Avni Yildrim that the winner of Canelo and Callum Smith would defend the title in a mandatory defense against Avni Yildrim. So this is a fight that Canelo had to take in order to hold on to both belts, the green belt, but hold on to the two belts that he has in order to try to win the other belts because Canelo wants to become the undisputed champion. Now, he's also fighting Avni Yildrim because Avni Yildrim, on paper, doesn't seem to pose a threat to him, and if he beats him, he can, he fights, for a second time in just a couple months. So basically, you can consider this almost a 2020 fight that you didn't see because he didn't fight twice in 2020. And he's actually given boxing 3 fights in 2021. And, so for the critics, it's like, yeah, I know this dude's not a big name guy, but try to understand why Canelo's fighting him and also appreciate that the pound-for-pound king is planning on giving you 3 fights this year, something nobody does. Most of the big-name guys fight twice every year, which I appreciate that, but when you're pound-for-pound king, the guy that everybody wants to see fight most is going to give you guys an extra fight. Take that shit, whoever it's against, and, then go into detail and understand that this guy is, he has to fight this guy. This is the deal he made in order to become the undisputed world champion. And I don't think anybody's going to complain about that. And that kind of prestige of being the undisputed champion nowadays is huge, unifying all 4 belts. So that's why this fight is happening. Canelo just didn't pick Avni Yildrim as, oh, I want to fight that guy next. No, he has to fight this guy in order to hold on to his belt. So, people need to understand that stuff. So, Canelo coming into the fight, he's coming off a huge win December 19th against Callum Smith. Smith was the undefeated #1 guy in the division. He had the WBA belt, the super title. Canelo went in against him. The vacant WBC title was on the line as well, so 2 of the 4 major belts. And he whipped Callum Smith's ass, took the belt. Prior to that, Canelo moved up to 175 and beat Sergey Kovalev in 2019. And before that, he was down at 160, where he unified belts and beat Daniel Jacobs to unify 3 of the 4 titles at 160. So Canelo's rolling right now, man. He's really been in his prime and really been on top of the sport, and fighting this way, this dominant style, full confidence, pretty much since the second Triple G fight in 2018. This is that fight, the 2 in 2019 and Callum Smith. Canelo just looks like he is unafraid and he's going to win at all costs, and he's just been dominant. He really has. He's looked great. So Avni Yildrim, he's rolling into this fight super confident and with a plan going into the rest of the year to fight Billy Joe Saunders in May. That pretty much is a verbal agreement between those two. And then he, it looks like Caleb Plant, the IBF champion, is the favorite for September. So Canelo definitely has a plan in front of him, and it starts with Avni Yildrim on February 27th. So Avni Yildrim coming into this fight, the thing is the reason why Avni Yildrim is a mandatory challenger is because 2 years ago, in February of 2019, he challenged Anthony Durrell for the vacant WBC title. Now, this was a ranking. He did not deserve a title shot going in, and most people, myself included, felt Anthony Durrell was going to whip his ass. Durrell was a former champion, and nobody felt Avni Yildrim was even going to be in that fight. And, his claim to fame prior to that was he fought Chris Eubank Jr. in the World Boxing Super Series in 2017 in the quarterfinals, and Chris Eubank whipped his ass and knocked him out in the 3rd round. So, that was his only loss, but that was his best competition, and he rolled in against Anthony Durrell, and, everybody thought the dog Anthony Durrell was going to whip on him, and that just didn't happen. It ended up being a really good scrap that most people felt Yildrim should have won, and Cut stopped the fight in the 10th round. They went for a technical decision, and Anthony Durrell took the technical decision. Most people felt that Yildrim should have won. Yildrim protested that to the WBC, and the WBC did something that that them and other governing bodies don't do a whole lot. They mandated a rematch between Yildrim and Durrell. Now, that fight didn't happen because the WBC had a champion in recess, undefeated former champ at the time, David Benavidez. Benavidez when you're a champion in recess, you jumpstart the mandatory challenger, so you jump him. You can move right in front of him. So Benavidez did that. September of 2019, he fought Anthony Durrell and stopped him in the 9th round to capture the title. Then, because of COVID and an injury to Avni Yildrim in 2020, him and Benavidez couldn't get together. So Benavidez then ended up losing the title on the scales before an optional defense against Romer Angulo in August of last year, 2020, and the belt went vacant. Ergo, Avni Yildrim moved to the front of the line again. But because Canelo was a franchise champion at middleweight, 160, the franchise champion is allowed to move up in weight and move ahead of any mandatory challenger. So they allowed Canelo to fight Callum Smith with the understanding and the agreement that he would fight Avni Yildrim next. So that's the whole story behind these two guys coming into the fight and why this fight has been made. Now, let's jump into who do I think is going to win and all the questions that we got to ask on both sides. So let's start with Canelo. He's the heavy favorite coming in. What does Canelo need to do to win this fight? Well, Avni Yildrim is not a guy that is hard to find or hard to hit. He's actually a guy that likes to come forward when he fights, and is not a, doesn't pack a huge punch, and Canelo's never been hurt. So I think Canelo defensively just needs to do what he's been doing. Come forward, work the body, and throw combinations, box, set up your knockouts, and he definitely, the same kind of style he's been using, it can win. Avni Yildrim is not going to tower over him the way Callum Smith did. There's not a big size disadvantage, so Canelo just needs to come forward and do what he's been doing, throw combinations, box, and set the knockout up. And I think he can be successful if he does that. Now, second question, do I think Canelo can win this fight by knockout? Absolutely. For a couple reasons. One, he has the power to knock, he does have the power to knock out Avni Yildrim for sure. So that's one. I don't know how early the knockout could come, because you have to really base that off of the Chris Eubank knockout of Avni Yildrim, which came early in the fight, but they were also throwing bombs in that fight. That was a straight slugfest. That's not really Canelo's style, but the knockout could come early because Canelo sets up his punches great where his timing is perfect. So, he could definitely land one of those perfectly timed shots and end it early. I think more towards the middle rounds is what I'm seeing here. Kind of a breakdown to set up the knockout is what I see, but definitely could come later in the fight too. Depends on how much defense Yildrim plays in this fight and doesn't get hit by clean shots. So we'll see. So the next question, can Canelo win a decision? Absolutely. Canelo's the better boxer. He's the better fighter overall on paper, and he's fought the way better competition. So if Canelo, somehow doesn't break him down and knock him out, then yeah, he definitely can win by decision. Back to if he can win by knockout real quick, the other option I was going to say is Yildrim hasn't fought in 2 years, so there's going to be some rust there, and him going 12 hard rounds against the pound-for-pound king, that's going to be a tough task for him. So Canelo, if he doesn't stop him with pure power shots and combinations early to the middle rounds, he definitely can win by knockout in the late rounds by just breaking him down and Yildrim getting tired. So definitely could happen that way too. Now, what does it mean for boxing, or what does it mean for Canelo, and what does it mean for boxing if Canelo wins this fight? It's huge. For Canelo personally, it's not going to be a huge name on his resume, but it's huge because of what it sets up afterwards. It sets up the Billy Joe Saunders fight in May to unify belts. It sets up, and if he were to win there, he has Caleb Plant after that, for the undisputed world championship. So if Canelo, beats him, that's big for him and his plan. Again, it's not going to be a big-time name on his resume. People, at the end of the day, aren't going to care, but what it's leading to, it's important and it's big. And Canelo, we need Canelo to keep winning fights. Boxing fans do. It's good for boxing if Canelo wins. Absolutely. The boxing world needs Canelo to continue to capitalize, because the more this guy wins and sets up those big fights and becomes that De La Hoya, Mayweather, Pacquiao-esque type fighters, to where fighting Canelo is the prize in all of boxing, then we can look at other guys and they can learn off of Canelo's example, just like Canelo's learned off of Mayweather, Pacquiao, De La Hoya. So we need Canelo. We do. The boxing world does. Now, what does it mean for Canelo? What does it mean for boxing if he loses? It's hard for me to see Canelo losing this fight, but you never know in boxing. You just never know. It would depend on how he lost. If Canelo just totally does not take Yildrim serious and were to lose a close decision, it would hurt Canelo, but I'm sure there's a rematch clause in the contract. And Canelo would come back, take it more serious, and probably erase that come May. But if he were to get knocked out, that would be devastating for Canelo. But Canelo's never been hurt, so the likelihood of that happening, it's kind of hard to see, but doesn't mean it can't happen either. So, yeah, it would be bad. For boxing, it would hurt boxing for sure if Avni Yildrim upset Canelo. One, Avni Yildrim's not a big name. So you wouldn't, the boxing world does not need the pound-for-pound king to lose to a guy with no name and, without a huge name. I mean, that would be bad for boxing. It would, because Canelo, like I said, he's a pound-for-pound. He's him winning and continuing to win and set up the big fights and set up those prestigious fights like Undisputed. Canelo, even when he wins, he's making himself more of a global star, but he can also make the other fighter a superstar, and the better names that he fights, the more you're going to know boxing, the more you're going to know some of these guys if they get in the ring with Canelo. So, that's good for boxing. It really is. So it's bad for boxing if Canelo loses to a guy without a big name. So that's the Canelo side of it. Let's jump over to the underdog, Avni Yildrim, now and ask those same 5 questions. We start with the first question. What does Avni Yildrim need to do to win this fight? Well, he says he's going to fight the way Triple G fought him. And if he can stick to that game plan without getting hurt, and he can box the way Triple G boxes, he's got a shot. Triple G fought him tight, fought him close. Both fights. You can argue Canelo lost both those fights, especially the first one. If he can get away with that without getting hurt and getting hit, then great. But here's the problem. Avni Yildrim is not Triple G. Or at least he hasn't showed us that he's Triple G. So, he's going to have to dig deep. He's going to have to box combinations and get inside of Canelo and try to beat him speed for speed without getting hit. And he's got to play defense. That should be his key thing, is playing defense in this fight. Absolutely, he's going to want to fight more like he did against Darrell than he did against Eubank, but he cannot go in there bum rushing Canelo. Canelo will hit him, and he will hit him hard. I think he needs to try to box with Canelo first and see how he can do. And then if that doesn't work, then he doesn't need to go for broke yet, but he needs to put himself closer, body punches. Try to get close to Canelo and land a big shot. And if that don't work, then he needs to go for broke and take a chance. That's the thing, is these guys, these underdogs, Callum Smith, some of the other guys, that when they get into big fights, they can't handle the pressure, they tense up, and it hurts your career to go in there and not even give it your best effort. I would rather see a guy get knocked out trying to win than go in there and lay up on the ropes and get your ass beat for 12 rounds trying to avoid getting knocked out. You have to take that chance. This is the fight game. So, it's, I hope Avni Yildrim is coming to win, trying to win this fight, and goes for broke. No matter what the outcome, go for broke. That's the kind of style, Avni Yildrim, and mentality he needs to have going into this fight. And he's been the underdog before, and he surprised people before with that fight against Darrell. So maybe he was nervous against Eubank and fought the wrong game plan and went toe-to-toe with Eubank. That was a mistake. He got knocked out. But maybe with Darrell, that's really more the Avni Yildrim that we're going to see. But training hard is huge. That guy needs to be in great shape to go 12 rounds after a 2-year layoff. So that's the other thing. Okay, can Avni Yildrim win this fight by knockout? I'm not seeing it. It's not... Yildrim is not a big-time power puncher. He has power, but he's not a big-time power puncher. And Canelo's never really been hurt. I mean, I've never seen Canelo really get hurt. I think Triple G probably hit him the hardest and the most. And, yeah, Canelo looked like he got tired from accumulation of punches, but not hurt. So, I don't think Avni Yildrim can win by knockout unless he catches Canelo just completely flush and cold out of nowhere, and a punch that Canelo completely doesn't see, and he lays him out. That's the only way I can see him getting knocked out, but I think the likelihood of that happening is very low. Canelo does have good defense. Can Avni Yildrim win by a decision? I mean, it's going to be tough. Canelo's the better boxer on paper, definitely. Going to be tough for him to win by decision. Doesn't mean he can't. I think it's going to be a tough one trying to win by decision against Canelo. It really will be tough, but he needs to have the same mentality he had against Anthony Darrell and just go and try to win rounds. Go try to win rounds. I mean, that's the best you can do, is try to win the round. Don't just stand there and let Canelo take it. Go try to win rounds. Make it as close as possible. So, yeah. Okay. Now, what does it do for Yildrim? What does it do for boxing if Yildrim wins? For Yildrim, if he were to win this fight, no matter which way he won, if he wins by disqualification, if he wins by a TKO because Canelo gets hurt, and he just gets the win, and because Canelo has to retire, that's gonna make his career, because he will always have a win on his resume against Canelo, and he'll be a world champion if he wins. So most of the time, guys, just being a world champion, a former world champion, is huge for that guy. But to beat Canelo and have that name on your resume, that's huge, huge. So any kind of win for Avni Yildrim does wonders for him as a boxer personally. What does it do for boxing if Avni Yildrim wins? I mean, it hurts boxing. It does. I said that with Canelo. Canelo does not need to lose this fight, because boxing is going to hurt if Canelo loses. Boxing needs Canelo. They need their pound-for-pound king to win these kind of fights right here and set up the bigger kind of fight. So Canelo Yildrim, it would hurt boxing if Yildrim wins. What does it do for boxing if Yildrim loses? Or what does it do for Yildrim if he loses? And what does it do for boxing if Yildrim loses? For Yildrim, I mean, I'll tell you right now, if he goes for broke and tries to fight and does the best he can, whether he makes it close or not, he's going to gain the notoriety of the fact that he was in the ring with Canelo, that he got, just getting in the ring with Canelo gives you notoriety. You're going to be known to the boxing world. Oh, yeah, that's the guy that Canelo, whipped his ass back in 2021. There's that. If he goes for broke, you're going to get a whole new kind of respect for that. Like Callum Smith, we're always going to remember Callum Smith for getting in the ring with Canelo. But he's not going to gain that extra respect that you would get for going in there and trying your ass off. Canelo took Callum Smith's heart, and, your heart is taken because you allow your heart to get taken. That's my mentality. That's the way I see it. And when you get in there in this kind of fight, you got to go for broke. Do the best you can to win, and you never know. So if he loses, depending on how he loses, there's going to be a couple mentalities. Nobody's expecting him to win, so I don't think it's going to really hurt him that much personally. I think he can get his career back on track and go for it, but he's going to have more opportunities. He's going to get bigger names if he fights harder and goes for it. If he gets his ass whipped, he's still going to be known. He's still going to get opportunities. They're just not going to be as big because people aren't going to take him serious, and that's what he wants. So he needs to it depends on how he loses, how it's going to affect him. How it's going to affect boxing if he loses, it's not. To be honest, it's not. He loses this fight, nobody's expecting him to win this fight. I don't think anybody's expecting him to be in the fight. So if he loses, it's not going to hurt boxing at all. It's actually going to be good for boxing if he loses. So not going to hurt boxing at all. Now finally, who do I think wins this fight and why? I'm sorry, guys. Canelo, I would pick him even if it was a couple years ago when he fought before the Triple G fight, the rematch. I don't, but he has been fantastic the last couple years. His last 4 fights have just been awesome. And I don't see him slowing down. He's got a game plan. He's a free agent, so he can pretty much do what he wants and go where he wants. And I think he, wants those big fights. He wants to be undisputed champion because that's only going to make him an even bigger global superstar and allow him to do even more what he wants and fight who he wants. And right now he's kind of in his physical prime, and he's looking better right now than he ever has. So, I think Canelo is going to roll over Avni Yildrim. I think this fight is probably going to end within the first 4 or 5 rounds. It could end earlier than that. Canelo has that kind of power. I don't think Canelo wants a long fight because he's going to have to bounce right back against Billy Joe. And that's, technically might be a tough one for him in terms of boxing. He's really going to have to game plan Billy Joe. And that's just going to be 2 months later. So Canelo does not want a long-winded fight right here. So I think he's going to go in there. I think he's going to get Yildrim out of there in the first 4 or 5 rounds and retain his unified title. Billy Joe, he's just, Avni Yildrim is just a big underdog, too big of an underdog in my opinion, and I can't see him winning this fight. I just don't. I think Canelo's going to be a monster favorite, and he should. Canelo is not Anthony Durrell, who was, in my opinion, overlooking Avni Yildrim. you know, he's not Anthony Dirrell. He's much better than Anthony Dirrell, Canelo is, and I think Avni Yildrim, after a 2-year layoff too, I mean, man, it's just, there's not one piece of me that thinks Avni Yildrim's going to win this fight, you know, so, or could win this fight. But again, in boxing, anything can happen. Anything's possible, so we just have to wait and see. But that's pretty much it. That's my Canelo versus Avni Yildrim breakdown video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys check out the fight Saturday, February 27th, main event of a Dazn Card. And yeah, that's taking place in Miami. So with the crowd, it's not a full capacity, but it does have a crowd. And I hope we can continue to build these bigger name fighters and bigger name fights. So that's it, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. True Boxing, you've been hit with the truth.